The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Hello, welcome to Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin, president of Gosselin Martin Associates. As always, thank you for clicking on this video. We appreciate it. So as you may have heard if you've listened to our videos before, one of the underlying goals of the Healthcare Facilities Network is to increase the pipeline of professionals into healthcare facilities management. And so this particular episode is going to focus on career ladders. One of the questions we get a lot in our recruiting capacity and in our consulting capacity is, what are some career paths into healthcare facilities management? And it's a great question, especially now where the market is in a good amount of tumult, a little bit crazier than it has been in the past. And so we thought this video might be instructive. What we did is we have a great database of resumes. And so we went back through some of those resumes and we looked at what career paths did different individuals take into the director role of healthcare facilities management, because the paths that people take are very varied. And so what we do in this particular episode is we show you some of the career paths that people have taken to get into where they are in a director role. We'll do it for facilities management in this video. In upcoming videos, we will show career paths for planning, design, construction, or PDC, and for vice presidents to see how do people get to those roles. Because as I said, it's very varied. There is not one typical career path. And so we thought this would be a good video for this particular network, of course. So what I'm going to do is share my screen with you. We have, of course, removed all names from what you are about to see. Okay. So let me just explain a little bit how we've laid out this presentation. So when we look at people who are applying for different jobs, Jack and I just kind of group hospitals into different buckets. We once worked at, we were doing a job for University of Nebraska Medical Center, and we met with the vice president on the school side of it, the medical school side of it. And he said to us, and this was about 8 or 9 years ago now, if you've seen one hospital, you've seen one hospital. And that is really true. And we've used that particular line, if you've seen one hospital, then you've seen one hospital, quite a bit over the years, because they all are very, very unique. But one of the ways you can group them is by size. And so for this particular episode, and we'll start with the smallest and we'll go to the largest. We group them based on square footage. So you have starting at a critical access hospital. And if you're not familiar with critical access hospitals are in rural communities, typically lower population. They have to be, I think, 35 miles from the next nearest hospital. They can't have more than 25 acute care beds. They're governed a little bit differently. Typically, they're in very remote areas. We've done recruitments for critical access hospitals, and one of the big challenges is getting people to relocate. Now, some people love the rural areas. They love what comes with being away from the cities, rightly so. And I think that that can be a draw, but it's also a challenge because typically they are away from things, and you have to travel to even, normal things like those big box stores. So we start with critical access hospitals. And then our next bucket, as you'll see, is hospitals in size from 1 square foot to 250,000 square feet. And then from 250,000 square feet to 750,000 square feet, from 750,000 square feet to 1.5 million square feet, and then 1.5 million square feet and above. And this is the way we've laid out these different resumes. And that's arbitrary, I know, but typically, you go to 250 community-based hospitals, which people do love for a number of reasons. And then there's the next, if you're thinking about progressing in your career, these are the sizes. You're probably not going to start at a 2 million square foot hospital if you don't have any experience. So that's why we group them as we group them. One other caveat that I would say, and this is relative to career counseling, and we did a show on the network a couple of days ago about this, but people used to stay at jobs a long time, and you'll see as we go through some of these career paths, we will have 3 to 5 years listed before you move to the next step. But I'll be honest with you, some of that is just, we're recording this July of 2023. Some of that is just all flipped because people are scared of losing people. People are looking for anybody with even a modicum of experience. So some of these 3 to 5 years, I'll be quite honest, right now it could be 1 to 2 years of experience. So take that with a caveat, because it has changed since we made this last year. So it's a little crazy. So let's start with the critical access hospital. So as you can see, we're here on the left side. Facility size is critical access hospital. I didn't know there are 1,357 critical access hospitals in America. I get these stats from Definitive Healthcare. I don't know if I was surprised by that, but it was more than I thought. There's 3,876 acute care hospitals. And in total, and I know this number, there's 7,335 total hospitals in America. So 7,335, 1,357 of which are critical access hospitals. And critical access hospitals, as I said, come with their own buckets of challenges, from reimbursement to location. Some of them are really struggling these days. But, one of the things in your critical access hospital, since it can be a challenge to get people to relocate, and again, these are actual career paths. So we've seen critical access hospitals take their biomedical folks who have expressed a desire to transfer over to facilities and actually bring them into facilities management. So this particular person has associates, went to biomed, and then became a manager. From the biomed perspective, obviously they don't know everything about facilities management, but they work closely with facilities management. They know the technology, they know some of the infrastructure. So it's not necessary. So it's not necessarily difficult to transition as bringing somebody in from the outside. So that's your critical access hospitals. If you're trying to recruit critical access, piece of advice is always see what you have internally. So we move from our critical access to our next largest facility, our next smallest facility, which we've just grouped from 1 to 250,000 square feet. That could maybe go up to 350 or 400, but again, you got to pick a number, and sometimes it's arbitrary. Now, one thing on degrees, and we'll talk about it a couple of times, because as we move forward, you'll see that not everybody has a degree into these roles, even though a college degree is becoming more and more of a requirement. If you're new to the network, or if you're new to our podcast, the High Reliability Podcast, we've done a number of episodes on degrees in facilities management, the necessity to have a degree in healthcare facilities management because organizations are requiring it. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I will link to some of the, at the end of this particular video, I will link to podcasts that we've done and some shows on the facilities network that we've done relative to the need for a degree. Now, one of the great ways into healthcare facilities management, and we will also see it on the planning, design, and construction side when we release that video, but commercial construction folks, especially if they've worked in your hospital, can move into that manager role if they want to make the transition. Now, a couple of the challenges, sometimes it's money. You need to get, if you have a GC who's worked in your hospital, maybe he was the superintendent, she was the superintendent, they on a project that you did, they probably know your hospital, they probably know your people. But as I said, it can be a challenge relative to salary. They probably make more, but the economy, who knows where it's going within the next couple of years. But from an economic perspective, working in a hospital should and does provide more stability than in the construction industry, where you're more subject to the up and down of the economy. So bringing in a commercial construction superintendent into a hospital is a path that we've seen quite frequently. Now, I would say too that one of the items that we don't necessarily account for here is the technical and the soft skill component. Your construction superintendents, and I remember this when we had done in one of my past jobs, we had done greenfield construction, but we were building it from the ground up. And therefore, as we were building it, and it was for a continuing care retirement community that also had a healthcare center attached to it. As we were building it, there were no patients on site. There were no clinicians on site. It was just the project management group. We worked for the owner and the construction group and the subcontractors. And, there comes with that. And this was, 12, 13 years ago. So I know things have changed even more than that, but you're on a construction site. And so you can get away with a little bit more based on what you say and how you say it. And when when I transitioned over into a hospital environment where you're sitting with clinicians and doctors and occupied, there's a definite shift that has to occur on the communication side of it. And I just, that's something to be aware of. And, to be successful in the hospital environment, the healthcare environment, you kind of need to change how you operate because there are different standards. Let's go to our next one. Now, this looks like a large drawing, and it is. So we're going to start over here on my left. Again, we're still at a facility size 1 to 250,000, but you can see down here. So we go from top to bottom, and we call this the foundation level. There's a number of different ways, a number of different starts that people have taken to make their way up to a director level. So what do they have at the foundation? You see this associate's degree. Some folks, and we're seeing this more and more, have no healthcare experience coming in. They we did, and you'll see it on the network. We did a show, and I was talking to one of our guests, Taylor Vaughn, was a political science major in college and has made her way up to a manager level. And it's a great story of how she did it. And so, she had her degree, but not in construction or, not in the trades, but made a nice transition. So again, that's another path. And I think that we have to be open to looking at maybe non-traditional paths these days as the talent pool continues to be a challenge. So you can see there's a number of different ways, a number of different at the foundation where people can get into healthcare. And once they get into healthcare, and as I said, 3 to 5 years experience in these different areas, then they make their way up to a manager supervisor at a hospital, and then they become director. And so this 3 to 5, this may be 1 to 3 now, to be quite honest with you. Military folks always make a nice transition into healthcare. Typically they've got the mindset that you need relative to Joint Commission regulatory. Their mind is just is shaped that way. They're used to the pace of health. They're used to the being on all the time. They're used to regulation, typically have some good soft skills that they can bring, and very process oriented. So those are different ways up to that 250,000 square foot hospital. Over here to the right, we're bumping up 250 to 750,000. So again, these are career paths that we've seen. I just want to bring attention to this one on the far right, where this person began as a nuclear submarine operator and then became a maintenance manager in higher ed, then in a medical school, and then a manager of a hospital. That nuclear submarine program, and we've done, I'll link to that too. I see this sometimes when I'm dealing with hospitals. They'll say, oh, this person doesn't have a degree. And I'll counter, well, this person has gone through naval nuclear submarine education. And that program, if that program doesn't prepare you for a role in healthcare facilities management, then nothing will. Jim Smith, if you're listening to this, I'm thinking of you. Specifically, we talked about this a lot in our podcast. So if you see a resume and the person doesn't have a degree, but they're coming out of that program, you got to look at them because they have strengths that a lot of people don't. So I just wanted to highlight that on the manager side. Now, coming to the director, and this is this big grouping in the middle, we see a number of different ways that people have made their way to a director role. I'll go over here to the far left. You know who you are on this particular path. This person was a registered nurse, right? Came out of the military, was in the Coast Guard, became an RN, then worked at a skilled nursing facility. You know, those skilled nursing facilities, they are regulated by the Joint Commission. So they're used to the regulatory component, but obviously, you know, the pace is a bit different. Skilled nursing facilities are healthcare related, but there is a change, there is a difference. But all that said, they can still make a successful transition into healthcare facilities management. But that RN background is great because, you know, you've sat as a clinician and now you're sitting as the director of the facility. We come down here, we go back to the construction superintendent, you know, a project manager or superintendent. People who work in construction, project management, planning, design, construction, architects, they do make the transition into healthcare facilities management. They can make the transition into healthcare facilities management. Sometimes there's a little mindset change that can be required, you know, especially at the operations level. I guess I'm thinking more specifically when you're, you know, from the architectural perspective, you know, the design is one thing, but then the operationalization of that is another thing. But again, we do see these, you know, these groups. This person made a pretty nice transition from PM into a tradesman in a hospital to a supervisor and then to the director level. This person down here didn't get a degree, and you'll see these people don't have degrees through here, but they started with different things: the CHC, the construction certification, CHFM, Certified Healthcare Facilities Manager. I'm sure we'll see somebody who started with just their CHFM, but you do see these people did not have their college degrees and made their way up to a director level. A lot of folks in the military attain their degree as they go, if they didn't get it when they were in the service. And so I think these particular career paths speak to folks who have done the role and didn't get a degree to do it. We still stay at the 750,000 square foot level. You can see again, foundational level certifications. We just talked about degrees. Then they came out 5 to years experience in trades, FM, non-healthcare, healthcare, 2 to 4 manager, supervisor, and then the director level. So this particular person's, or these people, spent a number of years, you know, kind of making their way up. And that was actually more traditional. I think that was the more traditional career path. As we go, we're skipping up to 750,000 square feet to 1.5. Now at these levels, you know, you're typically going to want somebody who has worked in a hospital before. And we see it right here in the middle, right? 3 to 5 years, combination manager, supervisor, healthcare experience needed, especially when you get up greater than 1 million square feet. Those 1 million square feet hospitals are large, and sometimes you're starting to get a little bit away from the actual field, and you might be in a lot more meetings. You might be in a political organizations. We tell people all the time, you know, as you're interviewing, make sure that the organization is a fit for you, especially if politics are coming into it relative to organizational politics. And you'll see down here, you know, it is more unlikely to get hired into these size hospitals without that college degree. But you see, so, and that's what we say, you know, in rare circumstances, experience can be considered in lieu of the degree, but quite honestly, we're seeing that go away a little bit more, where the degree is becoming, you know, more mandatory. So you come out, you get 7 to 10 years experience, trades, healthcare, manufacturing. We've said this before in, you know, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, education, you know, those are FM worlds where people do transition into healthcare facilities management. Sometimes they do find it difficult relative to pace. Maybe not so if they're coming out of pharmaceuticals, because they're highly regulated to begin with. But sometimes folks from those disciplines of healthcare facilities management do struggle relative to the risk component of it, the compliance portion of the program, the pace of it. Certainly, healthcare is, as we've said a number of times, 24 by 7 by 365. I don't need to add another 3 hours to the day. So, those are always consideration as we look at this bucket of 7 to 10 years experience. Hopefully before they go to a director level, they do come in with some combination of manager, supervisor at a hospital. It's much easier, and we're not trying to get people to leave the discipline. We're trying to get people to come into it. But, being a director in a hospital environment is kind of like playing at the major leagues. And when you can play at the major leagues, then you can drop down to AAA if you want. I don't mean to say that as a slight as all, but if it's easier, I feel, to go from healthcare to academia or pharmaceuticals or manufacturing. The pace is a little bit different. The demands are a little bit different. We will find, though, that occasionally there are people who transition out of healthcare and they go to a different field and then they want to get back in because they miss the pace. Healthcare is kind of like a drug for folks. If you've been in a long time, you enjoy that pace. You enjoy the mission criticality of it. You enjoy the patient component of it. So, those are all things to consider as you think about, okay, do I hire somebody who has no healthcare? And then conversely, if you're a facility director now or facility manager and you're like, man, I'm getting tired of this pace of healthcare, I want to transition out. Certainly you can do that, because we do see other industries coming after healthcare facility directors. 750 to 1.5 million square feet. We'll stay with that before we go on. Here's a little bit of a security. This person was all over the place. And, I showed this one on the compliance video that we released in late June. We had a roundtable with Michael Gorham, Craig Stuckless, and Patrick Reinhardt. And this is not one of those gentlemen, but you'll see this person really took a circuitous route. But every experience here, and that's the beauty of working in healthcare facilities management or PDC, every experience that you pick up relative to the hospital helps you in this ultimate role. And you see a variety of perspectives. And so this person got their degree, and then, security specialist, then they went into the trades, then a safety officer, then a manager, then a director, and now a director of safety and compliance. And so really an interesting path that I think shows you how, there is not one set way to get where you get. Let's go now up to our largest facility size, 1.5 million square feet. Again, at this level, you're probably 100%, well, 99.95% certainty need that degree. Masters, masters is preferred as you get up to, especially if it's an academic medical center. Academic medical centers are typically, 2+ million square feet. You're going to need your degree to work in that environment. And I don't disagree with that. Isn't that great? I don't disagree with that. I think it's needed in that type of an environment. So, 1.5 million square feet, academic medical centers, that degree is required. 10 years minimum experience. I'd probably cut back on that now, to be quite honest with you. You're probably going to want to have, if you're going for a hospital that's 1.5 million square feet, 2 million square feet, 3 million square feet, they're probably going to want to see that you've operated in a large environment before. We do find some people that jump to those big hospitals from a square footage perspective, and they don't like it. It's funny, there's a bucket of people who love the community hospital experience, and it makes sense if you think about it, because they're just much closer to the patient. They're in meetings a lot, but the meetings are a little bit different. And so, if you look at our community hospitals, say 0 to 450,000 square feet, there are folks who go up to this large hospital that we see right here, and then they just feel disconnected from the reason that they got into healthcare facilities management. And so it's always, it's interesting how people's careers work out. The senior director role, just a brief thing about titles. We're using titles here. I always say to people too, though, titles are bastardized these days in some way. Some organizations have found that, oh man, we made everybody a VP. And so, they're taking VP titles away, and maybe they're making somebody an executive director or a senior director, when in reality, they do have vice president level experience. It's just that there are no VPs. They're getting rid of them. They're getting rid of the title. See the same thing relative to director versus manager. And I know, if you think about it, if you've been a director for 10 years and all of a sudden they're coming to you and saying, hey, we're going to make you a manager now, and your responsibilities are the same, maybe a tough pill to swallow, especially since on the resume, people are going to look at that if they don't talk to you, but they just see he was a director, she was a director, now they're a manager. What happened to them? So that's always a bitter pill to swallow. But as I say, I think, you really, and I know I do this when I'm looking at people, I look at what they're accountable for as opposed to what their title is. Because again, this can be like that bonus step where, especially at larger organizations where they create that senior director role, especially if you have multiple accountabilities under you, like this senior director, I wish I could see what they were accountable for, but they probably had some environmental services under them. I'm sure they had more than facilities. It might've been facilities, PDC, and EVS. But I think that, the thing to take away, if you're looking at these, if you're planning your career, you're thinking, hey, where can I go? What can I do? I would say this degree at the bottom is really important. And, even that master's, it's kind of like the education race or the degree race where, the master's is the new bachelor's. Again, not in favor of, but that's kind of the way things are going. We just finished with the VP of a system. This is a rather linear path, and I think I put this one in here because out of the energy sector, I guess with a lot of these, just tried to show some different paths where they're not all okay. I started at the hospital, I became a manager, or I became a supervisor, and became a manager, then I became a director. That's pretty straightforward, right? But the energy sector, especially due to sustainability and the demands of decarbonization and whatever is coming down the road, we know that energy focus is not abating, it is gaining. And so, folks coming out of the energy sector can make that transition into healthcare facilities management. Now, they might have the energy component, but they don't necessarily have the risk, the compliance, the hospital, but they can be, certainly they have the foundation needed to get into healthcare facilities management. So that's why I want to show that, because this person came out of the energy sector with management experience. So I just wanted to show some of those paths. That is certainly not comprehensive way that people get in, but I think it shows the variety of ways that folks get in. And so if you have questions, about career paths or careers, feel free to reach out. And I think if if you're considering a career in healthcare facilities management, there's a number of different ways. Everybody's got a unique journey. It's part of the reason I like doing what we do. As I said, when we were talking to Taylor Vaughn, kind of the Boston accent coming out, Taylor and Clayton Smith at Dallas Children's the other day, she was just, again, a political science person coming into healthcare facilities management. Clayton started on the construction side, working for CM. So as I said, I think the bottom line out of this, if you're an organization, be open to these, what might have been considered non-traditional career paths. Every individual is unique. Look at what they have. If they've got the soft skill component of it, maybe you can teach them the technical skill component of it. We've done a number of shows on the Healthcare Facilities Network where people have talked about what they look for in hiring in different traditional ways. Now, one final comment, and I'll close with this one. If you do hire somebody who doesn't have that healthcare background, and that can be a huge risk, you got to make sure that you mentor them and train them, because they're going to need help. If you hire them and you just leave them on their own, they're going to fail. And I know that, and I've been guilty of this too. It's very easy to say, or it's at the time you can say, I'll help them, I'll train them up, we'll mentor them. But then actually doing it is another whole step in its entirety, as you know. So anyways, those are career paths into healthcare facilities management. We'll do another episode. We'll do the PDC route. We'll do the VP route. But for now, I'm Peter Martin. It is the July 4th week. It's the only video we're going to release this week. I wish you and your family a great July 4th, and I wish the country a great July 4th. Peter Martin, Healthcare Facilities Network. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Healthcare Facilities Network.
Please give this episode a like, as it really does make a difference in helping to promote the discipline of healthcare facilities management.